Great. And now I'm going to share this screen to introduce our speaker. There we go. So first of all, a big welcome to Gamiel Yafai, who is to many people well known in the area of DEI, and he is a multi-award winning strategist. And I must say that it's been an honor to actually know him for this length of time. He is a board member to the Center for Global Inclusion. He was with us last year, and he's been since been a very active member with us. And I'm very honored to have him with us to actually share his insights over the many years that he has actually been in the space of DEI. I mean, I will be sharing his LinkedIn, so you can do that. But he is the founder and CEO to Diversity Workspace, a Diversity Marketplace, and it's been there since August of 2005. He's also an expert panelist to the GDIB, which is the Global Equity Inclusion Benchmarks. And he's been very active in the space of GDIB. He has also been sitting in many boards in different areas, just outside DEI as well. Recently, he stepped down from the Milton Keynes. I forget the full name of the Milton Keynes.
Parks Trust.
Parks Trust, that's right. And I was just informed that Milton Keynes is a city in the United Kingdom now, and wonderful news. And so I think good timing as well on his part. I'm not going to say too much more because I think it'll always be nice to hear it from Gamiel himself. So without further ado, I'm going to now pass the baton to Gamiel to take it from here. Over to you, Gamiel.
Sudeep, thank you very much. And can I just say, it has been a privilege working with the Centre. 2 years ago, I did my latest vision board of, where I expected to be in 5 years' time. And at the top of that vision board was, I want to have more of a global impact with using the knowledge and experience that I have upon society. And I can honestly say that the Centre for Global Inclusion has given me that platform, from the strategic objectives that I've been allocated. For example, I've been given 3 strategic objectives. All 3 of them involve the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Benchmark. One is to seek accreditation. The other one is to digitalize. And the final one is to increase awareness of the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Benchmark globally. It is a free tool for everybody. I'll tell you a bit more about it shortly. For those that haven't used it, you don't know what you're missing out on. So I've been privileged to work with the Centre only for about 6 months now, but I can see great things ahead. And Sudeep, thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody at the Centre for all of their help and support and guidance in my initial 6 months. But also I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this webinar. As Sudeep said, I've been a diversity and inclusion strategist now for 23 years. I got involved through collaborating with the Commission for Racial Equality in the UK. I'm UK based. I live in Milton Keynes. I was born in lovely Birmingham, UK, not Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm very proud of my roots and my heritage. And I'll tell you a bit more about my heritage. So I'm dual heritage, or some people would class as mixed race. My father was a farmer who came from the Yemen, hence the Yemeni music at the start. And he arrived in the UK in the early 50s. My mother was born in Scotland. Her mother was half Irish and half Scottish, but her father was born in Hyderabad in India.
Oh.
And the second link is that his father was actually born in Yemen. So I have two links to Yemen. And, you know, once again, I'm really proud of my cultural heritage. And one of my books, and this isn't really to sell, we produced 5,000 copies of Yemen Proud. And it was a book that once I started to dig into my heritage, I did so much research. I thought, right, might as well write a book about it. So this is a chronology of Yemen over the last 2,000 years, from the Queen of Sheba to the creation of coffee to Yemenis arriving in the UK. And you know, that's part of my heritage. But I also grew up, because I grew up in the UK and in Birmingham, with my father's friends, I was seen as Muslim. In Glasgow, with my mother's family, I was seen as a Protestant, because that's what they were. So apart from having two different nationalities, or you could say, apart from having bicultural competencies, I also had two different religions and a multitude of different life experiences. And those life experiences have really made me who I've become today. For example, and I don't know if I should share this with you all, but by the age of 10, I started to get into trouble, and I started to nick lead from church roofs, but they were derelict roofs, by the way. They weren't used. But also we started breaking into cars. So as a good Yemeni did, my father decided to send me to the Yemen. And he told my mom that I'd be gone for 6 weeks. 6 months later, my father came back, and 2.5 years later, I came back. So as you can imagine, I missed most of my schooling. I spoke Arab. I couldn't speak Arabic before going to Yemen, but I could speak it fluently when I came back. The only problem was I couldn't speak English as fluently as I could speak Arabic. So yes, there was pros and cons, and you could say the start of my work around equality was in Yemen, and watching women being treated as second-class citizens, girls not being allowed to go to school, girls not being allowed to work, etc. Not, you know, no female drove in Yemen. And Yemen is 99.9% Muslim. So you haven't got you could say, the different nationalities and different visitors that other countries would have. So it's quite set in its ways. So Yemen was, as I say, one of the starts of my career into equality, mainly from a gender perspective, but I'd already had lots of lived experience around race, seeing it from two different perspectives. You could say, I know I was probably treated less favorably in Yemen because I was seen as a Westerner than I was in the UK. So different type of discrimination. So, you know, that's a bit about my background. But in terms of what I do now, apart from supporting the centre and getting as involved as I can in the centre, I run an organisation called Diversity Marketplace. We are a team of diversity strategists, auditors, researchers, facilitators, trainers, and you know, we do everything we can do to right some of the inequalities that exist. And if we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you see, I see things from a very simplistic point of view. And I put that down to, one, being in Yemen, two, not having gone to university, but also just believing that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. And that's a Leonardo da Vinci quote, because it is. And we really need to take things back to basics on everything that we do. So In terms of diversity marketplace, yes, we do. We have lots of different clients. We've got more global clients now than we have UK clients, but also we have lots of different experience. This is what we do every single day, and my days are so different. This morning I was being interviewed for working on a global benchmark of experiences of heads of diversity in 323 different organizations. Then I had a couple of meetings. Then I had to report back, strangely enough, on to one of my clients on the GDEIB, who we've just finished writing up the feedback for them. And now I'm doing this, but everything we do is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do masses of research around the perceptions of minority groups towards employers, but the reality of working for those employers from different ethnic minority experiences, but also gender, disability, sexual orientation, and also to really bring to life the lived experiences of those individuals and how those experiences differ from the experiences of their white counterparts in those organizations. So to me, diversity, equity, and inclusion is just good business practice. It is about filling the gaps that exist in most processes. In fact, a question for you, and really this is not about the business case. Why do we need a business case? But how do you plug the holes in recruitment, retention, development, progression, to make them more inclusive? Why is there still little diversity in organizations? Why are our customers going elsewhere? And this is what organizations are finding. Why are women leaving at twice the rate of men? And also a really interesting one is we have 20%, let's say we have, and this is an example, let's say we have 20% of our workforce, which is diverse, but we're not really seeing that cognitive diversity in our organization. Why is that? I can tell you why it is. That cognitive diversity of thinking, creativity, and innovation, all of those things that we want diversity for. The biggest challenge that you will find in most organizations is that diversity, equity, or that diversity is at the lower levels. They may have lots of numbers, but the vast majority are at the lower levels. And what you tend to find is when they move into the middle level, that's where all the decisions, or where the majority of decisions are made. The problem is a lot of individuals don't stay there, or they leave, because the culture of that middle section is so different to their own culture. And what we're talking about here is high levels of diversity, but low levels of inclusion, because a lot of those senior leaders do not see the difference. They believe that they're treating everybody the same rather than treating everybody equitably. And that is a huge challenge within organizations, because you are trying to give everybody the same thing rather than looking at what everybody needs and giving them what they need in order to progress. We know that for middle managers, there's almost a piece of work that needs to be done around navigating the system, about understanding the culture, but also ensuring that senior leaders in that organization really get to the heart of the culture of their organization and understand that everybody experiences it differently. So the business case really is, filling those holes, filling those gaps, making sure that everybody sees diversity, equity, and inclusion as being their responsibility. Now, you may not have been told this earlier, so my apologies, but I hope you've either got your phones or your laptops, which I'm assuming you will have at least one of each, because what I'd like to do is use Mentimeter. And I will share some slides in a moment, but I'd like to share with you Mentimeter. And Mentimeter gives us, because as well as me sharing my knowledge, it would be really good to hear from you as well. And because we've got over 100 people here, it's very difficult to just get one view. So what I'd like to do is present Mentimeter. It is very, very simple to use for those of you that haven't used it. All you really need to do is type in mentimeter.com, menti.com into your phone or laptop, into your browser. And it should be very straightforward. So type in menti.com. And then it will ask you for a code. And the code is at the top of the screen. So I'll read it out a couple of times. The code is 6332-3521. So that's, Sudeep, would you mind putting the code in the chat just in case anybody's missed it?
Okay.
Thank you.
332352.
Yeah.
Oh, John has put it up for me. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. I don't know who you are, John, but I hope to meet you. Thank you. So once you've done that, it will bring up a question for you. And that question, because I appreciate that even on this call, there will be varying levels of knowledge around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will all be on a different part of your journey, and the journey is humongous. And for example, I've been doing this many years, but I know that much about diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, it's probably that much more than other people, but there is that much to know. And there are no experts in this area. We have our own experiences and we share those experiences. So each one of you will be at a different stage. So why do you think it's important? Brilliant. So create positive, productive, and by the way, this is all anonymous. We do not know who is putting these comments, but also we will share all of this feedback with you. So you can start creating your own business cases, and really go back and see what everybody's been writing. It's the right thing to do. We hear that all the time, and it is the right thing to do. But even though it's the right thing to do, our senior leaders really won't really get engaged until it's the right thing for the business. And you can prove that it's right. And that's one of the challenges that we have. We need to eradicate systemic racism in our institutions and society. Even though we are still seeing, whenever you introduce things, so for example, Black Lives Matter, a huge challenge for the world. But what it actually did was it got so many organizations focusing on systemic change in their organizations. Now, some people will say we haven't seen any change. I would say we've seen lots of change, lots of small bits of changes in terms of awareness where there wasn't awareness before, actions where there weren't actions before. We've still got a long, long way to go, but we are on this journey. For me, one of my reasons for doing this today is to speed up this journey, to speed up our awareness, to let you know of some of the quick wins, but also some of the things that we really need to get right. And if we don't get right at the start, then we will not be on the journey for long, or our journey will last forever. And I'll give you an example of that. Most of you will have heard of either staff networks or employee resource groups. Now, I treat employee resource groups and staff networks as different to other individuals. You see, for me, a staff network or an employee resource group should have a lifetime of 3 years, a lifetime to focus on, supporting their community, whether that's, LGBTQ plus I, whether it's, gender, whether it's race, whether it's religion and belief, or disability or neurodiversity. You focus and create task and finish groups for recruitment, retention, development, and progression. Otherwise, your staff networks are going to be around forever. And I know staff networks have been around for 22 years. When you start to look at the change in those organizations, there is very, very little. However, after that 3 years of actually doing and making sure that they've got the right processes, policies, etc., they become governance and they govern the organization. That's what's starting to happen. And those are the changes that are happening now. So, as I say, I'll share all of these for peace. What better way for being human so no one is or feels left out? To be a mirror of society. And that really is the best business case, because society contains our employees. So we engage our employees, we engage our managers, who all come from society. All of our customers come from society. How can we not reflect society if we are if everything that we do is about society? So many things here. I will share more with you. However, I'm going to stop. We will be coming back to Menti again, so don't turn it off. However, I just want to share a few slides with you. We are literally moving from one thing to another. And again, we'll share all the slides with you. So let me just reduce this. Those are just some of our clients. But one of the biggest changes, and again, I put a lot of this down to, the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. But also I see COVID, and for us in the UK, Brexit. What started to happen 2.5 years ago, organizations were starting to see diversity, equity, and inclusion as a systemic challenge, issue, opportunity, rather than what I call initiativitis. And even today, reading through one of the reports that I read on, catalysts for change, but also barriers to change in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, most organizations are still focusing and have what I call initiativitis. So literally focusing on one thing after another. So focusing on a bit of reverse mentoring here, or a bit of unconscious bias there, or focusing on gender. And believe it or not, there are still organizations that are still only focusing on gender, or focusing only solely on race, because they think it's going to make a difference. Unfortunately not, because if you think about gender, if you think about all of us, one of the things that all of us have is 5 what I call diversity strands. Every single one of us, we will all have an age, we will all have an ethnicity, we will all have a religion and belief or no religion and belief, we will all have a gender, we will all have a sexual orientation. That's 5 protected characteristics. I hear people say, yeah, but diversity and inclusion isn't about me. Of course it's about you. It's about every single individual. You are all protected in 5 different ways. But we've moved, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but we will share it with you. There is much more focus, and we see it in the report that I've just been reading, so much more focus on a systemically integrating and embedding diversity and inclusion into everything that your organization does, not seeing it as something new, but seeing it as an enhancement of what you're already doing. And that's how it should be. It's an enhancement. It's making it better. It's filling those gaps that exist due to whether it's colonialism, whether it's poor management, it is filling those gaps. And can I just say, there are 177 people on this call, and I'm so proud and privileged even to be able to support you all. So, governance, culture, attraction, employee experiences and processes, communications, all of these things individually are really important, but collectively they are vital for an organization to grow. Just looking at one of these on governance and operations, being able to monitor, measure, and manage, having that diversity of board members is vital, but not just having those board members that are diverse, making sure that they have a voice and they use that voice. They use that voice internally, externally. They put their name to things. They start talking about vulnerabilities. They start sharing their life experiences and making it acceptable to talk about things like mental health. Because as soon as your senior leader talks about mental health, they create that psychological safety for everybody else to talk about it. So, as I say, we'll share this model with you. Now, one of the things that I hear constantly is we're at the beginning of our journey. And even clients that I've done proposals for 15 years ago are coming back to me and going, we're still at the beginning of our journey. I don't actually say this, but I think it. But as long as they've employed people, they have been on this journey. They just haven't taken it seriously. In the UK, we've been able to apply what we call positive action. You might call it affirmative action, but we call it positive action. Positive action was introduced 23 years ago. A fraction, and I mean a fraction, of organizations have actually utilized positive action. The other question I ask individuals when they say they're at the beginning of their journey, I say, okay, so how do you know where you are? And nearly everybody says, well, we have staff surveys. No, how do you know where you are in terms of good diversity practice? Very few of them know where they are. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we offer a free, or what I call it, an audit tool. So the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Benchmark creates a benchmark for you. Doesn't benchmark you against any other organization. It literally does an assessment of your organization and then tells you where you are on this diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Most organizations don't do anything and start off sort of, you could say, not really creating the foundations that they need to create in order to have a culture which is inclusive to the needs of anybody. So what the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion benchmark is, it benchmarks 4 different groups with 15 different categories. And this is about digging deeper into what your organization is doing around diversity and inclusion. So group 1 is the foundation, and this is about the leadership, the strategy that's being created. So it assesses, it asks you questions. So it's curious. This is about being curious about what you're doing and getting you to evidence good practice around vision, strategy, and business impact. Not just, show me a policy. It's not about the policy. It's what impact has that policy had? How are you measuring or measuring and managing the results of that? Well, how is accountability demonstrated? And where have you shifted from? Also, what's your leadership involvement? How visible are they? How vocal are they? Also, you have a structure? Do you have a strategy in place? And what's the ecosystem for that to develop within your organization? The next group is internal. And this, again, focuses on recruitment. And again, how do you demonstrate that you're having an impact? How do you know how many people have left your organization because they don't feel that their promotion prospects are any good because they're from they have a disability or from a different ethnic minority background? So it looks at recruitment, it looks at advancement and retention, but also promotion. It explores deeply job design, classification and compensation, but also work-life balance and integration and flexibility. And then you've got the bridging group. And the bridging group is about how do we bring all of this together? So we know we've got gaps. So what do we need to fill those gaps? We need research. We need to find out what's going on. We need to find out who, the lived experiences of individuals. We need to understand that we need to monitor, measure, manage, and we need to do assessments, but also we need to get rid of any assessments that don't work. We need to be able to have inclusive comms. We need to have inclusive learning and development, and we need to have inclusive sustainability. And that's how we start to bridge the gaps that exist. And also there's the external, which is about your customers and society. It's about how we listen to and serve society. So the last four are, I would class them as CSR, the community, the government relations, the philanthropy that goes on. And what are we doing? Do we really talk to our staff? Do we know how much our staff are doing around this area? Or are we invisible to what they're doing? How are we being inclusive in our services and product development, inclusive in our marketing and customer service, but also inclusive in our resourcing and in our procurement? And these are all areas that need evidence. And once you have that evidence, it starts to, once you have that evidence, you can actually start to look at where your gaps are. And then you can design either, what I do is I use the action plan. So for all of these, we create an action plan. And from that action plan, we write a strategy. We don't write a strategy and then try and shoehorn actions into that strategy. The action plan is what you need to do. The strategy is how you're going to do it. And it's really important that we start looking at this in more detail. And before I, move on, I really want to go back to Mentimeter because I've got another task for you on Mentimeter. And I hope you don't mind using Mentimeter because, again, it's a way of us sharing with everybody else. So so if we come back to the Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion bench, and it's, it's not just the benchmark. Part of it is what we call, or what I call a maturity matrix. And it's really important. This is where you actually recognize where you're at in terms of, are you level 1 inactive? So diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't even on your radar. It just doesn't exist. You're not even talking about it. Or is it reactive? You're only talking about it when you're complying with legislation or some form of governing body for your industry. But apart from that, it's just not there. Or are you proactive? And proactive for me means that you're aware of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're starting to implement it systemically into your organization, into your policies, practices, procedures, but also you're starting to monitor, measure, and manage. So you're putting in place matrices to look at how you've advanced. Level 4 is progressive. So progressive to me is you've started to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion systematically, and you're starting to see results of what you've done. So you're able to see where you were at the start, where you are now, and the progress that you've made. And it's not just about progress, because sometimes finding out that you haven't progressed will show you that there's gaps in what you need to do. So you can fill those gaps. So you're constantly going back and filling gaps, but also you're making improvements for the future. Level 5 is exemplar. You are what every other organization in your industry who are looking up to. You are writing about this, you are sharing good practice, you are talking about the impact that this is having on your organization. So my next question. So bear in mind all of those 5 levels. Where are you? And then I'll share my experience and where I find and doing these with clients, where I find clients are at. Please keep adding to it. Again, this gives us a flavor of where we think we are. I'm so pleased that somebody ticked level 1, because you might be amazed at how many organizations are still at level 1. We think we're doing loads, but somebody said to me the other day that if you can't see it, feel it, touch, smell it, it doesn't exist. So if you don't have evidence, then it's not happening. And that's how we score our clients. Unless they can evidence something, it's not happening. So listen, thank you very much for sharing this. And it's important that we have some idea of where other organizations are. Now, my experience of doing these is that most organizations I work with, and these are organizations with heads of diversity, etc., will be moving from 2 into level 3. There will be some aspects of those 15 classifications that that they're doing well, but others that they're not. So this is not bad. However, where do you want to be? I'm quite happy for those that were on level 1 to go to level 2 or level 3, because this is a journey, and so I've been on this journey for a long time, and I've still got a long way to go.
Gamiel, there was a question in the chat about they would like to know who are those who actually was on level 5 in the earlier screen.
But I say this is anonymous. I don't know. If they want to reveal themselves in the chat, please feel free to reveal yourselves, but it's not our place to do so. Well, only because we don't know. But yes, please, if I'm to be honest, being at level 5 is something to be proud of. So please share who you are. So, okay, most of you, and again, this is a journey, so most, it's going to take time to get to level 3 and level 4, but all of you want to progress. And that's so important. But what are you going to do to get there? That's the important question that we need to ask. Get management to act. Applying GDEIB. Absolutely. The more, the merrier. And I can, even though I'm biased in so many different ways, I have never seen a tool like the GDEIB, and nothing that's free that's like the GDEIB. It is a professional tool that should be used more regularly within organizations. Start with strategy and with leadership, especially the CEO. Totally, implement unconscious bias training. And for those that say unconscious bias training doesn't work, unconscious bias training works if you do something with it, and if you have an action plan and a strategy, and you use the knowledge that you've gained from that training to actually impact the organization, inform myself more. You know, I'm still informing myself every single day. One of the beauties of my work is I learn and learn and learn and learn, and I never stop learning. Data collection, strategic planning, you know, there are so many different things that you can do. But I'm going to stop there and come back to my slides. So please bear with me. Okay, so we've got an idea of what the GDEIB is. We know that, you know, that part of it is a maturity matrix, and we all want to grow in terms of that maturity matrix. But there are barriers, and there are many, many barriers to inclusion. I'm just focusing on a few at the moment. Do you know the biggest barrier within every single organization, even those that promote good practice, is they don't do enough of it? You know, talking to a police force in the UK last week, they've got 2 officers with Tourette's. Now, Tourette's, for anybody that isn't aware of Tourette's, it is classed as somebody who is neurodivergent. And Tourette's individuals will swear and they'll use foul language unconsciously, and it just comes out. Now, 99.9% of people globally with Tourette's would never, ever see themselves working for the police because they just wouldn't think they were invited. The police do not promote the fact that they've got 2 people with Tourette's working for them. Can you imagine the impact that would have on their website and in social media or in the newspaper? Our police forces suffer to recruit badly, but yet there's so many good things going on, but we only ever hear the negative. And you know, that's one example. There are thousands. So when you go back to your offices,
protect those offices.
Yeah, when you go back to your offices, you know, do the research, really build those examples of good practice, and then start promoting them. Psychological safety at work is key. Psychological safety really came into its fore, really discussed around diversity, equity, and inclusion probably about 3 years ago. And now it's a major part of what we do. A lack of ecosystem, no way of, you know, of integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion, and creating this environment where everybody has a responsibility. And data, the importance of, you know, psychological safety. I just want to give you some examples. You know, psychological safe workplaces promote healthier, more productive, and more inclusive workplaces. Provides an environment for innovation. When we allow people to be more authentic, to be more of themselves, to actually come to work, knowing that they're going to do something brilliant and they're going to be allowed to do it brilliant, but also that they are allowed to uncloak themselves and be their true selves and not feel as if they're being judged by everybody. It creates an environment where people can bring their full contributions. It gives employees equal opportunities to thrive regardless of their situation, you know, and it will also allow creativity, innovation to flourish. Your employees will be more open-minded, creative, and able to find more solutions. You know, what did somebody who feels safe, you know, or where psychological safety is in an organization, these are the things they say. I feel safe to take risks in my team. I openly share and learn from other mistakes. Questions are always welcome on my team. It's easy to ask my colleagues for help. My unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. It's okay to talk about health issues and burnout. I'm not afraid to ask questions and share thoughts, and I feel welcomed by my team. This is an example of an inclusive ecosystem because everybody has a responsibility to drive diversity and inclusion. We just don't invite people. We, you know, by the very nature, we exclude people from this agenda by not talking to them and not giving them an opportunity to engage. all different levels. Anybody can do anything in an organization. So what can they do? So your executive team and senior leaders can, influence strategic direction, governance of diversity, be accountable, as well as those senior managers. They're the ones that create that psychological safety. They talk about their vulnerabilities. They set the tone. They become role models for behaviors. Middle managers advocate for other managers. They help those managers underneath them to grow and develop and to have and to create that, that sense of empathy and understanding, but also they encourage them to get to know their staff better. Line managers, supervisors, serve as ambassadors and change agents and encourage, case studies and getting people to talk about their experiences and share them within the organization. And staff can be either members of employee resource groups, or they can be allies. They can start telling their stories and really start bringing the organization to life. That's one brilliant thing about every organization. Your people bring it to life, but everybody has a role to play. And there is a slide that I'm missing. Oh, here we go. Now, who is the expert in your organization when it comes to marketing? Who's the expert when it comes to policy development? Who's the expert when it comes to HR? Who's the expert when it comes to communications? Who's the expert when it comes to learning and development? Who's the expert when it comes to IT or procurement or customer service? The function heads are the experts, and the individuals in those departments are the experts. So why do they keep going to HR or the head of diversity when they want to know what inclusive communications look like? They are the experts. One thing I say to all of my clients, get your experts using their expertise and getting each one of these function heads to create their own strategy to drive inclusive practices in their functions and share it with their staff. And then all of those function heads come together to identify the commonalities and the differences and work together, and then use the staff networks to find out more and to drive change internally and to influence, recruitment, retention, development, and progression. Every single person has got a role to play in your organization. Data. And I promise you, we do not appreciate the importance of data. In order to move from where we are to where we want to be, we need to have that data. I've got an example, and this is an example from a really good friend of mine who shared the slide, Toby Milton, and he put this together for us. So if we're seriously thinking about the impact that we have and of keeping people in our organization, one of the questions that people ask in the employee survey more recently is, are you seriously thinking of leaving the organization within the next 6 months? This is a real case, by the way, and this is about return on investment for a gender development program. So you as an organization employ 1,000 people. 40% of your workforce are women, 400 people. 10% of those are seriously thinking of leaving within the next 6 months. So you can sit back and watch them leave, or you can think about what you're going to do in order to keep them. So if you think about their average salary, and I've got pounds here, but I don't think there's much difference between the pound and the dollar these days. So an average woman's salary in the UK is about £32,000. Therefore, the cost of that turnover, including recruitment, unfilled role opportunity cost, ramp-up time, etc., is something like £662,000. To introduce an initiative into your organization will cost you probably £30,000, the salary of one of those individuals. But yet, people still want the business case. It is here and it is simple. I'm not going to share the quick wins, or maybe I might, and I'm just looking at time. So, we really need to be looking at inclusive behaviors. We need to be becoming allies for everybody in our organization, because each one of you will either have a son or daughter that may have a disability, and a parent who may be lesbian, gay, or bisexual, a really good friend who might be Muslim. We have all got we've got more connections to people around us than we know. The challenge we have is we don't know individuals well enough to find those commonalities. But inclusive behaviors. So we need to learn about everybody. One of the challenges for you is to go away and talk to somebody who you've never spoke to or very rarely spoken to, and start asking them questions about themselves, because that's your responsibility in terms of this whole ecosystem. Ask a team member if they're okay. If you see somebody that is a bit quiet, find out why. Step back and consider team diversity. Do you have a diverse workforce? And you know what? So many people just don't even consider it. Consider vegetarians and non-alcoholic drinkers at your next event. So there's a whole list of different inclusive behaviors. But I'm going to stop there because I appreciate that I've spoken at length. I may even, in fact, let's go back to Mentimeter for one more time, because I can tell that you really like Mentimeter. So let me just go to the final question that or one of the final questions that we have here. In fact, let's go to a more important question. Okay, I've shared and I have literally dumped loads on you within no time at all. So what can you do in the next 24 hours to help? And that should be help. This is my dyslexia coming into play. Help drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would love it if you would share with us just simple things. And I've mentioned a number of simple things that we can do in the next 24 hours. So share some of the info with others. Share the recording of this webinar. Share this presentation slides with teams to incorporate concepts into our DE&I strategy work. Join our EDI committee. Absolutely. Talk to others. And by talking to others, you don't have to talk to them about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just ask them how they are. Being kind is the most unused word in our dictionary, but it is, to me, the most important word. So don't give up, keep pushing and communicating, insert these ideas into my strategy, share this information with others, lead with it, amplify voices. You have a voice, you have a privilege, and a privilege is, to me, a privilege is just anything that you have that somebody else doesn't have. It's not about wealth or anything else. It is purely about having something that somebody else can benefit from and then sharing it with that individual. Problem is we don't know what others need. So let's, again, try and find out. So I'm going to stop there because I'm already a minute over. And I'm just going to say thank you very much for listening. And I appreciate that I haven't given you much time to contribute. I'm hoping that Mentimeter gave you an opportunity, and also it's some way that we can share with you all of this information. So, Sudeep.
Thank you so much, Gamiel. We really appreciate it. Very inspiring and gives us a very personal perspective, plus also a lot on what you've actually based on your experiences. So, like I mentioned to those who have any questions, feel free to put it up on the chat, or you can actually raise your hand using the reaction button, and I will certainly respond to you, and you can actually ask your question accordingly. Those who have to leave, we understand why, but remember, Gamiel and myself we'll be the last ones to leave. So those who wish to stay back and ask any questions or discuss any matters, feel free to stay back. Okay, I see straight away Anna from Spain. You have your hand raised. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much for the webinar, for organizing, and Gamiel, from the very inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
I have a difficult question. Sorry for it. My question is, and I'm also interculturalist, so not only diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and consultant, also interculturalist. Because of this question is even more difficult. Should we address or not the topic of sexual orientation in Islamic countries or in Muslim societies, if we know that this is a red line that for many people shouldn't be crossed? So what is your opinion on this?
Okay, so I have clients in the Middle East, and a lot of it depends on the organization, because if you've got family-run businesses, you mention sexual orientation, they will close you down. And if they close you down, then you don't get the opportunity to talk about systemic change in that organization. However, one thing that you'll be aware of is a lot of organizations in the Middle East are global. And when they are global, they will have staff in different countries. They will have customers in different countries. And what I always say to organizations is that, one, you give people choices. So for example, if we're asking questions in surveys, those surveys need to be optional. People should be able to say who they are, what background they're from, what sexual orientation they have. But the organization, shouldn't use that data negatively. So really, it's the difference is, if it's a family-run business, I guarantee you they will close the door on you straight away. If it's a global business, you can ask as many questions as you like, provided you have the option of, I decide, do not want to declare. And if people do not want to declare, that's their choice. But at least we're giving them the choice. Okay. What you'll find is, even in the Middle East, there are so many individuals, Muslims, and in fact in the UK and many other countries, there are so many Muslims who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and even transsexual. So we need to give people choices.
Thank you, Gamiel. There are three others who have their hands up. So Liu, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I have several questions. I hope that's okay. So my first question is, I was wondering, is it possible to develop a community? So basically my organization is trying to develop a community-facing EDI framework. So like to see how we can make our programs and our services more inclusive. But then I was wondering, is it possible to develop a big community-facing EDI framework if we don't have something like internally? We don't have something for our employees. So that's my first question. And then
can I just answer your first question first?
Okay.
The thing is, if you're not doing it, how can your external community believe that you are genuine about what you want to do and what you want to offer them.
Mhm.
If you're not
Yeah.
practicing it, and again, if you do not, and it's things like, I mean, lots of issues in the UK where we don't have that diversity at senior level, and the kids, you know, school kids even are saying, I want to work for an organization where people look like me.
Mhm.
So if you don't have it internally, your chances of encouraging others externally to do anything with you is, well, going to be a challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, and my next question is, so the community I'm living now is the majority of the residents are white. So we find it very hard to recruit people from marginalized communities to participate and give feedback. So on that sense, like, how can we develop an EDI framework in the community? The majorities are white people.
Okay, so do you need, the thing is, COVID opened the world to us. So we don't just have to recruit from our doorstep. We can recruit from anywhere, as long as individuals have competencies. More and more clients, you know, there is expertise in every part of the world. There is talent everywhere. And, you know, you don't necessarily need to recruit people from your local area, but also in your local area, it should always be about the best person for the job. It should never be about the diversity of the individual. It's about, you know, when we talk about representation, we talk about making sure that there is equality of opportunity. So individuals are recruited based on merit, on their experience and everything else, not based on their race. But COVID, as I say, COVID opened the door. We just need to walk through it. And there's still a lot of resistance on that.
Thank you.
Thank you
we'll
so
have,
much.
Iluya, I just want to make sure that others also have an opportunity to ask their questions, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. So Valerie.
Hi, thank you very much. Gamiel, you had mentioned about an organization with a couple of people with Tourette's, and the notion of, and it could be anything. It could be somebody in a wheelchair, or it could
Absolutely.
be somebody, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so it's just a placeholder kind of idea, how I'm using it. How do you balance in highlight the wish to, and maybe the benefits, and a certain amount of pride in highlighting your ability to embrace this kind of diversity with, I just want to do my job and go home because my kids, and, you know, I got to do my hobbies and my life, you know, and also with things that stand out depending on the community and the profile of an organization or in their community. There are some kinds of things that can be a real lightning rod for, pardon my language, social media, you know what storms, right? So how do you balance the risk of, you know, hate email and like versus, you know, for the benefit, the corporate, I'm assuming you can't justify it being a one-sided thing, right? Because we don't do that, right? Nothing about us without us and all that. But so I'd just like to hear you talk about that a little bit, the competing interests there.
Competing interests. Well, the thing is, I just said earlier, I'm Muslim. I consider myself to be Muslim. Every religion that I'm aware of, everything that's in the Bible, the Quran, or any other religious book, says that the only person that can judge anybody else is God. We do not have a right to judge anybody.
Religious diversity here?
Sorry?
Religious diversity here. I'm a non-theist humanist.
There you go. But again, we all have choices. But I would hope that as a good human being, that you wouldn't see yourself as wanting to judge other people. It's not, it shouldn't be about
To be fair, I think we know what it shouldn't be.
I know, but we all do it. We all do it. We do it. But
I'm not like, how do you, what can, where's I'm thinking, is there an obligation? Like, is there a if you're an organization and let's say, you know, somebody is willing to go along, and then crazy ass things happen on social media because the corporation has a presence there, and does an organization, do they have a responsibility to support the person?
Absolutely.
Like,
can I just say, every
yeah.
single organization has a duty of care to its employees.
Okay,
so that's
fair.
one thing. One, it has a duty of care, but also every organization should be focused on creating that culture of inclusion of anybody. And as long as there's good practice, as long as an individual isn't being negative towards somebody else.
Right, not harming. Yeah, not
absolutely.
Yeah.
Not harming in any way. They should have a voice. I mean,
Right.
if you think about comedians, and one of the things about comedians is when they're in a theater, they will use the most obscene language ever. However, you put them on TV, the language suddenly shrinks and there are no obscenities. And, you know, this comes back to banter, you know, where we talk about banter in the workplace and people go,
Sure.
yeah, but you have to have banter. Yeah, but there's levels. As long as you have banter that doesn't discriminate, doesn't alienate, doesn't harm anybody else, but you will always get social media. But you know what?
Right. So,
If you do things if the organization and individuals do things for the right reasons, they will get supported by the people that they need to be supported by. You will always get those naysayers. I mean, the backlash that we've had to, even Black Lives Matters in the UK, where organizations are talking about being anti-racist, etc., and we will always, the newspapers, you will always have right-wingers. You're not going to get away from them.
Right.
Yeah. So my philosophy is work with those that want to work with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I do need to move with
thank you.
Also waiting. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Gamiel. So I'd like to go to Madhujit.
Yeah. Thank you for the beautiful presentation, Gamiel and Sudeep. My question is quite related to what Valerie said, that organizations have got it all right. If you do the stats, they've got beautiful diversity, beautiful. But when we actually go inside, as we go higher, I mean, something's not right. And that something is about mindsets, which we are not able to measure. We're not able to articulate that this is where things are going wrong. How do we get there?
Okay. Now, with senior leaders, and this is a challenge that most organizations have, most of those senior leaders will genuinely believe that they are good people, that they are honest people, that they wouldn't knowingly treat anybody any differently. However, three things. One, they have their own biases. Two, they have huge blind spots. And three, they don't know what they don't know. So their assumptions are that they're being good to everybody. They're not differentiating. There isn't, but also they do not see a problem in their organization.
So how do we get there? That's the whole point. How do
we need
data?
Yeah, to be honest, most of it's two things. One, we need to create employee voice. So you can do that through your employee resource groups. You can actually run focus groups. You can do webinars to actually using Mentimeter on webinars. We use that so much now to gather voices. Imagine how many voices we've heard today, over 100, and we're able to capture that. You know, so we can use that to actually get employee voices. And where we see lots of similarities, we can start running focus groups and really dig deep into the root causes behind, you know, some of the challenges. But also with senior leaders, one thing that's working really well is either reverse mentoring or mutual mentoring, and linking senior leaders with individuals who are, lower down in the organization from different minority backgrounds or disability backgrounds really does open their eyes. And honestly, I've seen individuals as mentees become almost a shadow of their mentor and following them and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations to large audiences, because that senior leader, one, doesn't have the confidence to speak about race. They didn't realize there was a problem until they actually spent time with somebody. So yeah, there are numerous initiatives. And if you want to email me, link in with me, I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Thank you, Mabijit. Thank you. So Hafiz.
Hafiz, hello, good afternoon to you.
Thank you, Sudeep. Thank you, Gamiel, as well. That was a really interesting presentation. I hope you're well.
Very good, thank you.
I'm actively actually working on a GDE&I audit with one of our clients at the moment, so it's perfect timing. I'm actually conducted an interview on Category 5 today. But my question is actually based on what you said earlier about ERGs. You said that 3 years maximum is what they need, and what's the idea behind that?
It's like anything. It's like a piece of string. If you give somebody an hour to do something, they will create something pretty good within an hour. You give them a week, they start procrastinating and they start to move off into lots of different directions. One of our big problems with ERGs over decades, and I mean, I first got involved with an ERG in 2005, and it was Birmingham Women's Hospital, Women's Network. And that was, and even back then, that was literally a moaning shop. And it's where people just went to air their issues, but no real actions. And that's why you need to have, 3 years to me is a long time. I would rather say, give them a year, get them really focusing, but using the resources in the organization. For example, if they're looking at recruitment, they work directly with HR and they work directly with comms, but you actually have task and finish groups purely focused on achieving rather than talking about what they want to achieve.
I see. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to speak to you again about that.
I'm sure. When you're ready.
100%. Thanks for that. Cheers.
Okay, Hafiz, thank you.
Cheers.
Brianne, I hope I'm pronouncing your names all correctly.
Yes, hello, I'm Brianne. I'm in California. I work for a global company that's in wilderness education, and there's a lot of fear-based as far as the senior leadership. It's kind of fear-based as far as they know they want to do something, do the right thing, but a lot of the decisions go to, we don't want to be political, so we'll say nothing. And a lot of things are like that. At the top, at the bottom, it's more inclusive, more diverse in a lot of the levels. So how do we help the senior leaders to make that move? You talked about the senior leaders a little bit, about mentoring, but this question is more about fear-based culture. How does that start to change?
This is really, really interesting, and partially because one of the best conferences I went to last year was in a school, and it wasn't it was a DE&I committee, not for teachers, but for students. And it was really interesting to hear their points of view around their two things. One, colonialism, and how we've eradicated women from history, how we've eradicated race from history, sexual orientation, etc., but also their expectations of employers. Their expectations, for example, they want to see people who look like them. They want to go to an organization that is inclusive of them, that will value what they contribute. And I promise you, once those kids start to speak, that's when senior leaders start to wake up, because they're the future of education, they're the future of employment. And if you can create a DE&I network or committee with those students, you will be amazed at what happens next.
Great. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for raising the question. All right, Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, you're on mute.
You're mute.
I lowered my hand and I didn't do the other bit.
Hi there.
Thank you for hosting. First of all, I have so many questions. I raised my hand because I had one question, and then I actually have questions based on some of the discussion. I'll start with the first one. I am relaunching a pilot for GDEIB within my state government organization. I work in the US. And I say relaunching because I tried 3 years ago and we didn't have the right leadership in place. And so as a state government, that our organization is primarily staff who identify as white. It's in a state where there's a progressive metro, I would say a DEI progressive metro population, but by and large, the state is rural and not progressive. My concern is around psychological safety, sort of polling or gauging, because we have been moving DEI work within our organization for the past several years. But to your earlier point, unless you measure it, how do you know how it's landing, what the impact is? And while we have become more diverse in our staff, we are still primarily a white identifying organization. There's still a lot of imbalance in terms of diversity within our leadership group. And my primary concern is with staff of color, staff of culture, and the impacts to them when it comes to unique psychological safety measures. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Wow. This is the big challenge that we have, is that so many staff from different ethnic minority backgrounds do not feel safe in their organization. They do not feel that they can progress. And they don't, because they're not really engaged. And it's not them that need to be engaged. They're not brought into the wider conversations. And when senior leaders talk about psychological safety, they're talking about what psychological safety for your average white male or female. They're not looking at what psychological safety means for somebody from a different ethnic background or an indigenous background, because they miss out. And this is about culture. All of this is about culture, and it's about having that homogenous culture where it's explicit, but you've got hidden and shadow cultures. So the hidden and shadow culture, the explicit culture is what the majority experience. The hidden and shadow culture is what individuals from minority backgrounds experience. And nobody links them up. Nobody asks the questions. Nobody goes out and tries to find out their lived experiences of the culture of the organization. And when organizations start to do that, then they're able to start filling the gaps. But you need to, and again, this is really about talking to people and making them feel safe to actually know that the answer that they're going to give you isn't going to detriment them in any way or form, because there is a huge fear that progression opportunities will suddenly disappear, that job prospects and you could say opportunities to progress in any way just won't happen. So senior leaders have still got a long way to go, but they need to appreciate the difference between psychological safety for one group of people and psychological safety for another.
That's great.
Thank you.
So
And-
there is a question on the chat for you, Gamiel, and I'll speak on Janet Alexander's behalf. She says, I'm assuming her pronouns are she, so forgive me if I'm mistaken. Janet says, my workforce is about 30% ready to retire. And we have a great push for diversity recruitment, especially target those Gen Zers.
Yeah.
Or Zers. Aside from the typical outreach and job boards, I'm looking for bright ideas to get great results for diverse applicants.
Okay.
So I think this is an open question, not just to you,
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone else has any ideas. I'm sure Janet would definitely appreciate this.
Well, we've helped the likes of Chant TV, State Channel 4, and many organizations, the police and many organizations. And one of the best ways of recruiting, particularly from ethnic minority backgrounds, is using religious establishments. You may not hit the kids directly, but you will hit their parents. You know, we run events in mosques, synagogues, gurdwaras, temples, black churches, to attract. And all of those areas, all of those different communities will actually give you 10 minutes to talk about your organization and the why you want to recruit from their communities, what it is you offer them. And what you can also do is build an ambassador base. So community leaders from lots of different backgrounds. And we've got, I think it's a Guardian that have 450 ambassadors that we created many years ago. And again, just leaders. And what we did when we worked with them was every other week, we would send out all of the job opportunities that are available at the Guardian to all of those 450 ambassadors that would put them up in their post on the notice boards, that would talk to other people. But honestly, there are lots of things. We've got a client who, for the police, they've got a link on their website to Thames Valley Police's recruitment site. So when anybody goes on, it's just about being a lot more proactive and applying positive action, but identifying places where you are more likely to reach different people from ethnic minority backgrounds.
Thank you, Gamiel. I see one from Blith Butler. I hope I pronounced this person's name correctly. It says, one of the key essential elements might be to engage the leaders in conversations about learning in general, so they can demonstrate their learning mindset in many different ways. And that seems to open up opportunities where they can lean into DEI in a meaningful ways, in brackets, not fear-based, and engage in listening to diverse voices in the organization in very honest ways. He gives courtesy to Aiko Bethia. All the credit goes to her. Wondered too if the issues of fear and grief are ones that we need to address in this work to find a way to hospice the dominant culture. Your views, Gamiel?
Yeah, my views are, we'll do a lot of work around authenticity and around individuals. So one of the questions that we would normally ask in surveys is, how much of your authentic self do you bring to work? And normally we will get, and we'll use a sort of a 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, 100%. And the majority of people aren't able to bring any more than 70% of themselves to work. And, you know, and what that does, when we ask, the next question is, why are you not able to bring your authentic self to work? And predominant answer is fear of being judged, fear of being discriminated against, fear of being treated differently, fear of lack of promotion, progression. Fear is a huge issue and challenge, you know. But the next question that we ask is, what does the organization need to do in order to alleviate that fear, that judgment? And then you'll get lots of different answers around things that managers have done and said and shouldn't be doing, but lots new. Most of the solution, in fact, every single solution to every human resource problem is actually in your organization. And your organization is like a big jigsaw that's been chucked, just chucked in the air, landed everywhere. And really, it's just about pushing all those pieces together. And most of that is about the conversations. And that's the glue that brings everything together. Showing people that they are more similar to everybody else than they are different to everybody else.
Right. We have also a question from Hamlin Grange. He says, my DEI consulting firm is developing a trust index within organizations. How important is the level of trust for organizations to successfully implement DEI programs?
And my simple answer is it's imperative. Without trust, no relationship. You don't have relationships. So if you want relationships, you have to build trust.
Okay, that's simple and succinct. All right, Jacqueline has raised a hand again. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Thank you. I had one other question that I did want to ask, and it comes down to emotional labor, compensation for emotional labor and cultural competence at work when it is benefiting leadership, when it's benefiting policy, internal and external. It's no mystery that many organizations drive the DEI initiatives, the body of work through the labor of and use of leveraging of their staff of color. In my mind, compensation for all of that, for the risk taking, going out on a limb, risking discrimination, microaggression, blatant, all of that. Is it power and the ability to hold leadership accountable? And what might that look like? Because so long as there is complete dominating power within leadership bodies and not a culture of shared power, say, for example, through an equity council. What might that look like? To
me, this should be quite simple. Most people that give their time freely, are quite happy to do so if they see results as, at the end of it. The challenge that we have is, as you say, individuals from different backgrounds will talk at conferences, will do webinars, will be the face of the organization from a disability perspective, but the organization never changes. I genuinely believe that individuals need to be rewarded. Absolutely need to be rewarded for any interventions. Even today, I was talking to a chap that I know well with a disability who's been asked to talk at their company conference. I said to him, make sure that you get paid for it. This is not part of your work. This is not what you are employed to do. So make sure you say, okay. And I said, I've even sent him a copy of a proposal. And I've said, right, send your employer this proposal with a cost next to it and see what happens. And then I'll support him afterwards. So he has got the support network. The biggest challenge is a lot of individuals from different minority backgrounds don't have the support networks, don't know what to do, are fearful of asking for anything in return. So we need to find different, maybe we create networks or support, to support individuals, or create buddies for them to talk to and to share their experiences and how it made them feel. Because most people will just go and do it and then walk away without any reward, without even, I mean, I've done some stuff where people haven't even said thank you. And we're talking about half-day training programs, and the head of the organization hasn't said thank you. And that really, really sort of gets to you.
Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you, Gamiel. I see Brianna also has a burning question again. So over to you, Brianna.
Oh, thank you. Someone else's question helped me to spark something else about addressing harm done by organization to BIPOC, people of color, people with disabilities, things like that, harm being done, and realizing that it needs to be addressed. So helping senior leadership, the organization as a whole address that, because this, working on diversity, moving forward, making strategies, it sounds great, but if we don't address what already has been done as far as organizational trauma, harm, how does one move forward? Thank you.
Do you have ERGs or employee resource groups or networks?
They are just starting.
Okay, that should be, you see, for me, again, employee resource groups have got a huge responsibility in terms of recruitment, retention, development, progression, but also anything else that their community want to raise. And they are, from an employee resource perspective, they are the link between staff and those senior leaders. But also what we're starting to see is that all of the chairs in some of the networks that I'm involved in, all of the chairs have their own network. So they get together and share those commonalities, but also that intersectionality between each of the groups. And they sit above, and then they feed into senior leaders. But, this is about how the organization, and maybe, you will probably have allies as well within the organization and some activists, but use the knowledge that exists in the organization. And honestly, most of your solutions will be on your doorstep.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
All right. Yes, we have Lisa.
Hi there.
Hi.
Two things I just wanted to offer up for Jacqueline. You talked about this idea of people being, should they get paid? And I definitely think they should get paid. Just start there. But I've worked for some international companies, and both on a national level and global level, put a lot of work into DEI. And what Gamiel was saying is very true about you want to see results. A lot of this comes from a place of, you probably couldn't pay me enough because this means so much to me as who I am and the justice that is involved with it. But having said that, what I found was that just the initiatives alone weren't resourced. There's all kinds of resources for going out for drinking and having a good time and socializing, but the resources for actual, what Gamiel was talking about, put a number to something, and then there's a decision to be made. You wouldn't under-resource IT or a marketing initiative or something like that, but a people initiative not being resourced, this is like, to me, doesn't make sense. So I would say that's one thing that you could start to look at in terms of initiatives. The other thing around, somebody asked a question around diversity building if you're not already diverse. So I belong to a couple of volunteer organizations, and I happen to be a co-director as a DEI. First DEI that they brought into this association. We insisted that we have a buddy, that the first directors would be because you need that sounding board. You need somebody to pull you off the ledge when you've been microaggressed to death. You just have to have that ability. So the buddy system is a really good answer to that as well. But also the way you call in people for diversity. There are so many ways, and if you don't check your patriarchy or colonialism and how you call somebody in, the person that you're looking to get says, why would I? Your languaging is the same, you don't, so all these things matter when it says we welcome difference. Well, what are you doing differently to welcome that difference? I'll stop there, but thank you.
Thank you.
That's great sharing, Lisa. Thank you very much. All right. It's amazing. A lot of people like to stay back. So yes,
Yes.
I would always think I'd like to encourage anyone here who would like to share some of their own experiences in relation, or for that matter, if anybody has anything that they think that is pretty unique or innovative in these current times, or maybe something that they just want to get some general feedback, because you've got about 75 people here, and this is a great opportunity to get some ideas and thoughts about things you're doing. Anybody? The best chance to, and I assume everybody is in some way linked to DEI. All right.
Sudeep, I've got a feeling they've probably heard enough of me.
Yeah, so I'm just
and, you
asking.
know, I really appreciate, honestly, I so appreciate you taking the time, firstly, for the first hour, and then another 45 minutes. You know, maybe we have a follow-up on this in terms of, you know, promoting good practice and really going deep into what's going on out there and how we can all benefit from it. We've shared one tool today in terms of the GDEIB, and you know, but there will be other tools. But also, it would be really nice to hear other people's experiences and lived experiences when we do the next one.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Gamiel. There is one question from Bobby Ryan. He's wondering what DEI stats would we recommend pulling together?
Wow.
So that's an interesting question. If anyone can help him here, please reach out. Bobby, please share your connection. I would like to encourage everyone to share their LinkedIn so that everyone can be connected. I think this is an opportunity for people to share.
Yes, please feel free.
To use this. And remember, if you need to save this chat, you can do so by going into the chat button, and there are 3 little dots there. Go into that and say save chat. Please use that. I see Anna has a hands up. So Gamiel, they're not tired of you yet. Okay, so so go ahead.
This is because Sudeep, you are encouraging people to share ideas, so this is your fault. Sorry. Or your responsibility. No, but one thing, I think many of us, we are working globally, and what we experience here in Europe is sometimes when we talk with clients who are coming from the US, the headquarters in the US, from the European clients, we hear do something, but not this US stuff. So there are already a lot of prejudices towards how people in the US do D&I work. So I think what can be interesting is really to share in one session how is different understanding in different countries, how to implement global strategies locally. And my question before was related to it. I'm working with one of the Islamic countries, and this the topic of LGBTQ, it's not easy to address, and but this is only one of an example. So maybe we could dedicate one session to implementing global strategies locally and what are the differences and so on.
So Anna, on that basis, if I may, we have been organizing webinars coming from different parts of the world. It's not been very North American centric. In fact, next month, we'll be having another session on DEI and mental health. And we're getting 3 people, one from, and this is going to be an Asian perspective. So 1 person from India, 1 from Philippines, and 1 person from Malaysia. 1 is a Christian, 1 is a Muslim, and the other is a Hindu. And they'll all be giving their own views about DEI and mental health in their own countries. And so it's going to be very Asian, but still very diverse. So we try to actually promote that. So just make sure you link up, all of you link up to our LinkedIn page, our Facebook, and also our Twitter, or to any one of us. Gamiel's in the board, I'm here. Anima is also here as one of our ambassadors, so you can reach out to us. Okay. So I think we're coming already for, as Gamiel pointed out, I'm happy to see everyone staying back. I'm afraid we couldn't offer you any drinks or food for this session, customary, but we would like to thank you. And I think it's for being here with us. I'm going to ask Gamiel if he's got any parting words before we all say goodbye. So Gamiel.
Yeah, my only parting words is, remember, it's not about you, it's what you do for others that really counts. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. In the UK, it is now 5:45, and I think our next webinar is at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So looking forward to it, Sudeep.
Yes. And remember, if you wish to get the access to this recording, which will also have the questions there, please,
Yeah.
I've sent you the email to write to Jeannie Spa, or you can reach out to me as well as the slides. Thank you. And
thank you all.
Everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Sudeep,
Yes.
I would love the slides. Can I have your email address to, I can't find it in the chat fast enough. Is there a way that you can put it in there quickly so I can send it to you?
I'm putting it on the chat now, okay?
Yeah.
Thank
Sudeep,
you.
can I just check? You've got the email addresses of everybody that registered.
Yes.
It's probably worth us just literally sending the slides, the responses to the Mentimeter to everybody.
Well, the thing is, we always have issues when some of these emails are incorrectly put and we get a bounce back. So we normally what we do is we say if those are really wanted, they will send us an email and then we will immediately send it to them. So it gives us a personal touch. And if they've got any other questions, you can put it in that. It normally works better.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
This was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a glass of water, Gamiel.
I think I need some sleep, Sudeep. This was one of those days where, sometimes you wake up really early and you just cannot get back to sleep. Today was about 11 minutes past 3 this morning. Not a good day not to sleep.